Well, I asked, where's the beef? Let's call this for what this is. Oh my God! They are so hopelessly woke. How dare you? That is the intellectual capital of the left today. Give me a break. You are now watching the Daily Roundup.
Hello, everyone joining us at home, and hello to our Quebec correspondent, Alexa Lavoie. I'm Tamara Ugolini, and we will be your hosts today on our daily stream. It is Monday, a manic Monday, July 17th. How are you doing over there, Alexa?
I'm pretty good, and you?
Good, good. So for anyone joining us at home, if you're not familiar, this is our daily roundup or a daily live stream where we can deliver some newsy items of the day, provide commentary, just sort of general chat about what's going on in the world, both home and abroad. If you're joining us on certain platforms, so we are streaming on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Getter. And on Rumble, you can actually engage with us directly by sending us a small monetized donation, $5 or more. It's called a Rumble Rant. And by sending us one of those through Rumble, you help fund our independent journalism and keep our operations afloat. But also it's a fun way for you to give us any tips or tricks or get any of your musings off of your chest, and we'll read your comment on air. So that's only available on Rumble. Unfortunately, YouTube has demonetized us completely, and so we're kind of teetering on this fine line on YouTube with certain content. If we go against whatever their community standards are for this particular month, we will be deplatformed from them pretty much at the snap of a finger. But we're not yet. We're just demonetized. So I always urge everyone to go over to Rumble, support our work there, and help keep the lights on. So, I'm not even sure what day it is in terms of David Menzies always opens with whatever international day of whatever. I don't have anything fun and catchy like that. I won't even try to impersonate David. He is just one of a kind. You just can't impersonate the Menzoid. There's no comparison there. He is truly one of a kind. But I want to give a special shout out before we go into our topics for today to Deborah and Nicholas from Windsor. I haven't been on the stream in about a week and a bit. I was dealing with some personal issues, but they gifted David and I these really fun personalized license plates I guess it was pretty much 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And so I haven't had a chance yet to thank Deborah and Nicholas from Windsor for their generous gift, their really beautiful letter that they wrote to us, and of course, just in general, their support. So Nicholas and Deborah, if you're watching, thank you so much for that kind gift, for those personalized license plates, and for the beautiful letter that you wrote to both David and myself. Thanks so much. All right, so I got that off my chest. Well, I guess, Alexa, we should just get right into things here with the failures of the Justin Trudeau Liberal government. I mean, surprise, surprise. Their policies seem to be like this sort of never-ending, failing democracy. Well, they try to simultaneously say that they're upholding democracy, and part of that was through this piece of legislation called Bill C-18. And so by trying to, I guess, in some roundabout way, promote Canadian content on news organizations, on social media platforms, they have also blocked news organizations from posting, and of course, Rebel News is part of that, on their social media platforms. And so just this past weekend, we saw many Instagram users lose their access to Rebel News and other news sites in response to Bill C-18. So Sheila Gunn-Reid, our chief editor, wrote this up over the weekend. And it reads here, just verbatim, in response to the Liberal government's shakedown on behalf of failing media companies, Meta, the parent company of both Facebook and Instagram, has begun blocking Canadian sites from some users. And so, Alexa, I don't know, tell me, was it blocked from your account? Or I've heard that if you toggle your location setting off, or if you have a VPN, that this won't happen to you.
For myself, I'm using a VPN, so it didn't happen to me. But I saw that a lot of people have commented and say that they cannot see the news on their site.
Yeah, we saw that. So there's some screenshots shared here in this article. And of course, we have stated our Instagram pages have been blocked due to the Trudeau Liberals passing Bill C-18. So you can see here, it says people in Canada can't see your content. And as we described in this article, the outages began Friday night. That was July 14th, when some users reported a message to Rebel News accounts, which read, and then you saw the screenshots there. So this is called the Online News Act, which basically forces social media companies, or what they're now being called as digital intermediaries, to pay news organizations when links are shared on their platforms. And I mean, Google, Meta, all of these intermediaries have come forward and said, like, this is impossible. And this is also a huge hit to their bottom line, right? They don't want to pay out for hyperlinks, and just simply trying to track and trace all of that is a massive undertaking. So in response to this heavy-handed piece of censorious legislation, Meta has just gone ahead and said, forget it, we're just going to block all the content. And you figure it out, Government of Canada, which is actually acting more like, the Venezuelan government or the Chinese dictatorship than an actual democracy that is hinged on robust debate through a democratic process and freedom of the press.
And when you think about it, the news organizations they benefit from their platform, and they want them to receive money or in exchange. But in fact, it's the fact that they share the article, that they have more click, they have more people read the article and are aware of the news. So I don't see the point to ask those platforms who are actually essential and beneficial for those news outlets to pay them also with the benefits that they have. Like, when you look at that, we have like Justin Trudeau, who called us organization and not news, but we are suffering too from the bad move that he's taking and the policy that he wants to impose on those platforms. So they just put like all the news outlets in the same basket.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of bittersweet to see that it affects also the mainstream media and mainstream news outlets and ourselves. I mean, it's very unfortunate. Obviously, we don't want to see any content blocked in our country because, as I mentioned, we're supposed to be a constitutional democracy, and we're supposed to have freedom of expression, and we're supposed to have freedom of the press. But as we can see more and more, this slippery slope with the Justin Trudeau Liberals and the doublespeak that they talk out of one side of their mouths and then do the other. They're trying to uphold democracy somehow by instituting all of these censorious pieces of legislation, which I and many would argue is doing the exact opposite of whatever they're intending to do. And whether the intention is nefarious or not is maybe a conversation for another day. But regardless, we see now that all news organizations and news sites are being blocked in Canada, thanks to this ridiculous piece of legislation that has been condemned pretty much right from the onset. There was senators, there was MPs, MPPs, I'm sure even, who were saying, like, this piece of legislation doesn't make sense. The intent here is not what's actually written. It's so ambiguously worded that it's hard to interpret. And that just seems to be kind of a regular occurrence now in the House of Commons with the Liberals. Their policies, their legislation is just so ambiguously worded that it's open to interpretation. So no one's really sure how it will be implemented on the ground. And when it is, this is what happens. Just a complete epic failure by the Liberal government. I was hearing this morning on the radio, various talk show hosts, various guests were coming on just saying, just scrap the bill altogether. There's no sense trying to make it work. Nothing, there's that old adage, and it's poor English, but it's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So nothing was broke before. It doesn't need to be fixed. Just rein in this piece of legislation, say, you know what, we made a mistake. We're going to rein this in. We're just going to terminate this piece of legislation. And then however they want to try to prioritize, I don't know, getting paid, paying the little guys, or the upholding Indigenous diversity somehow, they can try again at a later date. But I think that the whole piece of legislation just needs to be reined in because it's obviously failing. And you have the mainstream media now also chiming in and finally starting to realize what this will do to them.
But in the same time, the mainstream media outlet wants the Meta and all those platforms to pay for their mistake, because their mistake was when the internet started. They say, "Oh wow, this is a nice opportunity for us to share our content, to make our news out, that most people can have like our news available." But the thing is, they never thought that now everybody will be on the internet and people will not watch the TV anymore. And so they put the content for free on the internet. And now they see that they should have put a payment for a subscription payment, because now everything is free since the beginning. And they, as they say, it would be hard now to ask people to donate money and to pay a subscription when it was previously free for them.
But if they were doing their jobs and they were actually speaking truth to power and they were passionate and they were listening to what on the ground Canadians, everyday Canadians, are truly experiencing in their everyday lives, then I think Canadians would be happily willing, as they do with us. Like, we're a crowd-funded news organizations. We rely on the generosity and the donations of our viewers to keep our operation afloat. And so we listen to our donors. We listen to what people on the ground are saying, what they want to hear more of, what they think needs to be exposed, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've seen, though, that the mainstream media doesn't operate that way. They've just pivoted to become government-sanctioned cheerleaders funded by the taxpayers, who unwittingly have to contribute to try to keep this failing source of news afloat. But we can see now that means that they must speak the truth of whatever the government thinks should be told to the people, and become the megaphone for the government, and especially throughout the COVID era, for public health restrictions and for the public health bureaucrats, and just unquestionably amplify whatever flavor of the day the government wants to have in your ear. And so it's funny, it's ironic to see a piece of legislation like this affecting, both parties equally. And I know there's always a roundabout, right? There's always a workaround. People will figure out a way to gain access to the content, whether it's through a VPN or a direct source like your email address. There will be workarounds, but I think the government is starting to see just how much they've failed at this piece of legislation as it continues to make headlines. And we have another, before we go to an ad break, we have another story here out of Australia. Our Australian correspondent, Avi Yamini, and the lawsuit that he has ongoing. And so it shows, and I mean, the proof is in the pudding here, that Meta has a contract with fact checkers. Basically, the fact checkers have to meet a certain quota with Meta, and it's all a healthy, great business relationship. So here he details secret agreement reveals a quota-based commercial fact-checking agreement worth up to $500,000 every year. And this comes between RMIT's university's Fact Lab in Australia. And this is a confidential third-party fact-checker agreement, which has come to light, as I mentioned, during Rebel News reporters Avi Yamini's defamation case against RMIT Fact Lab over a false fact check on one of his reports. And so it says here that the document provides crucial insights into the undisclosed pact between Meta and RMIT Fact Lab, where the university's fact-checking department is contracted to deliver up to 50 fact-checking articles each month aimed at combating what it views as mis- and disinformation in Australia. I mean, Alexa, can you believe it? Because I can.
But of course, when you receive as much as money as that, at the end of the day, you will question yourself, what is their goal? Are they do that in a good belief, or they are doing that just for reaching out the money at the end of the month? So, and who are they? In which sector they are specialized to fact check misinformation and disinformation, as they call?
Well, and who defines mis and disinformation?
Mm-hmm.
Because we saw the government and their public health bureaucrats over the last few years, they have been a pretty consistent leading source of mis and disinformation. And again,
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't catch our opening, I have to be a little bit careful what we say on YouTube, but
Yeah.
with that safe and effective narrative, there was a lot of pieces to that puzzle that were just left out when that marketing slogan was touted and amplified by the mainstream media repeatedly
Mm-hmm.
over the course of 2 solid years. They left a lot of little pieces out of that marketing slogan that weren't exactly true. But this article brings up a great point, because this agreement, which they say is believed to be worth nearly $1 million annually, so
Mm-hmm.
this is not just pocket change,
Half
raises
a million.
questions
Yeah.
about nearly 500,000. Thanks, Alexa. It raises questions about the independence and motivations of the fact-checking organizations involved. I mean, again, why would you bite the hand that feeds? It's the same with the media party that just amplifies and cheerleads on behalf of the government, because they're who's funding their wages. And so when Meta is funding and helping to offset the operational costs of this university's fact-checking lab, of course they're going to just speak the narrative and regurgitate the narrative, because otherwise they're not going to get paid. That's the whole point here.
Yeah.
Follow the money. Like we were told always, follow the science, and misinformation and disinformation. But repeatedly, if you tried to follow the science, it didn't really make very much sense until you followed the money. And then all roads lead back to pharma and the people who would profit from exactly what they're telling you. It's not science-based, it's monetary-based.
Yeah, but in everything, you follow the money and you will find the truth.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly. We have, it's another screenshot that was shared by CBC. So yeah, because Rebel News, getting back to the censorship and Bill C-18, Rebel News isn't the only piece of content that's being censored here. We have also a screenshot that was shared from Harrison Faulkner. I think he's from True North, and that's what CBC looks like right now for Canadians. So there you go. Our state-funded media also blocked by social media platforms. I mean, you have to laugh, because otherwise you'll cry. This is just complete grotesque ineptitude by the Liberals and their ridiculous pieces of legislation.
But I'm just wondering, they say people in Canada cannot see this content. Do that American and people around the world can see those content, or it's just us that we cannot
because
see
they
it?
don't. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of Bill C-18. That's just a piece of legislation that's specific in Canada. And so these companies don't want to pay for the links and to share this news content across their platforms because of Bill C-18. So now they're just blocking it all. Sorry, that's what you get. And they told, like, the government was very aware that this would happen. Google, Meta, these social media oligarchs told them that this wasn't going to work, this wasn't going to be sustainable, and it wasn't going to be an effective business strategy. So they would block the content, and they're following through on their threat. And so we're seeing the fallout of that play out in real time. I'm very interested to see how this is going to go. Are we just going to blindly accept that this is I hate to use this word, but the new normal in Canada, where you have to find workarounds to get access to your news? Will Canadians just kind of passively, as we've seen, they're more apt to go along to get along than actually push back or advocate? I'm interested to see how the next couple days, couple weeks will go, if Canadians will get mad about this, or if they're just going to say, oh, that's just the way it is now, we'll just go along to get along.
But in the same time, it's so funny because if media outlets from example USA is starting to just like taking article or publishing like Canadian news, they will have way more people will share their content and see their content just because they are outside from Canada, and people will be able like to share the Canadian story, saying it is not produced in Canada.
Yeah. Thank you, liberals. That see, like you can't even make sense of it. It just doesn't make any sense. So let's go to a quick ad break, and then we will come back to discuss some more failed policies, and this time in terms of immigration.
How in the world could such a small group of people with limited resources change world history? But in fact, that's happening, and it's the power of the truth. The truth is like kryptonite.
Healthcare isn't in some sense working very well. Foster Colson is thinking about this. He's got a new company, an online healthcare platform called the Wellness Company.
Telehealth company called the Wellness Company.
The Wellness Company.
The most popular product is the detoxification supplement that features nattokinase. Nattokinase is the only enzyme that we're aware of right now that dissolves the spike protein. Spike protein is loaded in the body with the COVID-19 infection and definitely with the vaccines. We've been completely accurate on the spread of the virus, early treatment, on the deficiencies in hospital care, and now the deaths that are occurring after vaccination. This is a human outrage, and it's occurring at the end of a hypodermic needle. Isn't it interesting? Natural substances combating this man-made disaster.
No matter what, God will bring us through. And I said, we will not bow down to your gods.
For tickets, showtime details, and to see the trailer, please go to SaveTheChristians.com.
Everyone, how's it going? Just want to talk to you for just a moment. Here at Rebel News, we understand what it's like to be independent, to try and get by without big handouts from the government. Small business owners alike out there understand that like nobody else. That's why we might be able to partner up and do something incredible, bring a captive audience and new eyes to your business or your product. If you think we might be able to partner up, and if you want to support independent journalism while growing your brand to a captive audience, well, reach out to us. You can do so by going to rebelnews.com/advertise.
My mug? I know, it's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
All right, next up, we have first, before we continue, I wanted to say that Church Under Fire screenings are coming to an end, but there is one last opportunity to watch it in Edmonton tonight at Church in the Vine. The event starts at 6 p.m. And so you can find that by clicking screenings if you go over to SaveTheChristians.com. Those events, we have seen them sell out all across the country. What a great turnout we've had, and people just being so moved by that documentary. It was very powerful. Always great to get out and mingle with rebels in the wild. So I would urge anyone who is still on the fence and hasn't seen it yet, if you're interested and you're in the area, head on down to Church in the Vine in Edmonton tonight. The last screening's at 6 p.m. I think there may be more in the future, but we have to work out those kinks and those details. So head on over there. Next up, we have a video from our producer, Efron, who toured down into the streets of downtown Toronto really late last night. Good on him to get out there and do that. Like, I think nearing midnight last night, to investigate the scene at a homeless shelter that you had gone to previously, Alexa, and maybe we'll get to that in a minute. But let's just show you this quick little video here that Efron took late last night in front of this homeless shelter downtown Toronto. And that was at Peter Street. You were there, Alexa, what, about 4 or 6 weeks ago? How is it different now and then?
It's so crazy. At the beginning, it was the beginning of what we just saw. There was a couple of people, mostly refugee seeker, some from Nigeria, some from Zanzibar, other places in Uganda, other places in Africa. And they were arriving by plane, by visiting visa. And what they told me is like they arrived and they went to the office for applying for the refugee status. And what they were saying to them, they were shipping them to 129 Peter Street. But at 129 Peter Street, I was talking with it's a homeless place shelter, and I was talking with the employee, and what she was saying, it's they keep sending them there, but they don't have the funding from the federal to take care of the refugee seeker. They are therefore taking care of the homeless people. So since they don't have the money coming from the federal, they cannot do anything. And they tell them that they have no place for them, no shelter available for none of them, but they keep staying there because most of the people are arriving at that place. So it's create a kind of community where they try to help each other, and they have no place to go. The shelter are now collapsing because they have too much people in there. The hotel where the refugee seeker went are full for most of them. So what is going to be the next? Do the street will be full of refugee seeker before like the city or the federals is doing something? Like, this is a good question.
It looks like it. Yeah, it's good to differentiate between the fact that these are refugee claimants versus this is a homeless shelter, which have entirely different mandates, entirely different funding. And then so Efron actually wrote an article to complement his video and kind of tie in some other newsy pieces. And so I'm just reading through it here that I wanted to share with our viewers, that in here he notes that there are 7,347 homeless people in Toronto alone. And shelters already face staffing, not only staffing shortages, but bed shortages. And now we have also this newly elected mayor of Toronto, former NDP MP, Olivia Chow. She's calling this, I mean, rightfully so, I would agree, that the number of asylum seekers residing in this tent city, and this is happening this is just a small pocket, but this is happening all across the city, is a crisis and an emergency. And we have a clip here down toward the bottom of this article of Olivia Chow, where she is calling on the Justin Trudeau Liberals, the federal government, to deal with the crisis by giving her $160 million to address the crisis. Have a listen.
Well, the refugees that are stranded in front of Peter Street, we know that our shelter is full. We also know that a third of the residents in shelter right now are refugees. We also know that refugees is also a federal responsibility. And we need at least $160 million from the federal government to help us in sheltering these refugees. And immediately, we need the government, the federal government, and the provincial government to come up with a plan. It's a crisis. It's an emergency. There has to be a plan that can immediately shelter these folks. And there are a lot of ideas. The refugee serving agencies are very clear in what they want, and they've been asking the federal government to join the city.
But my point now, look at how they try to solve the problem, but not seeing where is the origin of the problem. If we have like more refugee seekers, where they are coming from, where do they arrive, and why? And can we do something for maybe stopping the migrant to try to come to Canada as a fast movement like that? Like, can we stop the process? Can we do something for that? Instead of asking money for trying to find them a lodging. Yeah, because they don't think that lodging for what, months to years until that they get heard, if like they are approved to be like allowed to stay in Canada. And that is until they get their working visa, until like they be allowed to or being able to pay a rent. This, we talk about more than what she asked for the money, because we need to see that at a long-term spending money.
Yeah, it's a typical NDP policy. We'll just throw some money at it and hope that it gets better. But instead of saying, let's go to the root of the problem, maybe we should claw back these extremely liberal immigration policies because we just don't have space. We don't have the resources. Sorry, we're closed because we are at capacity. We can't help the Canadians who are struggling, let alone bringing in refugees who are coming to our country. Like, this is also really heartbreaking for many of them who are coming into our country on this promise of a better life, of a more fruitful future, of coming to a first world country. And here they're just being discarded and put onto the streets. So, you know, I don't know what kind of promises were told or given to these people before they decided to make their voyage into Canada. But I can almost guarantee that this isn't the outcome that they left and fled their home country to come into. And you have Justin Trudeau admitting in another clip that we have here that our population is growing faster than the supply of housing. We've known this for years. And instead of allowing a record high number of immigrants into the country at 400,000, and that's just documented immigrants. We have no idea how many are coming through, as you've investigated, Alexa, through illegal border crossings like Roxham Road and otherwise. Yeah, here, let's just share this clip of Justin Trudeau on the housing crisis and immigration.
We know that there are no simple answers in the housing issue. There is just significant numbers of different angles and programs that we need to put forward, that we need to get right. As we see inflation rise, as we see people looking at the increased value of their own homes, we need to at the same time make sure that young families, that first-time home buyers have access to the housing market. That's why addressing supply is so unbelievably important. Our population is growing faster than the supply of housing.
Thanks to your Liberal government's policies. Like, this guy is so out of touch. He can't even see that his own government policies are what is causing the fallout of our country as we once knew it, and what he calls plaguing Canadians. That's him. That's you, Justin Trudeau. You're the one that is plaguing Canadians with your failed policies and your inability to look at things long term. We have Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. I don't know what the exact quote was, but something about it's all based on mathematics. And Justin Trudeau previously said that he has like a basic math calculation learning disability. Here we have this clip. You know what? Let's just play it because it's fun. Chrystia Freeland. Sorry to anybody who doesn't want to listen to her voice, but here it is.
Core problem with housing in Canada is we just don't have enough housing. It's just a mathematical thing. Canada has the fastest growing population in the G7. That is fantastic. That is actually a huge driver of economic growth, and it is one of Canada's competitive advantages. But we cannot have the fastest growing population in the G7 without also having the fastest growing housing stock in the G7. And we don't have that right now. We have a shortage of homes. Because the core problem with housing...
So maybe it's time to hit the pause button.
We don't want to heard her like repeating the same thing. But I heard many building construction company who speak out right now saying, we are not interested to build anymore. First of all, there is so much bureaucracy level to pass through and make everything more and more difficult. But there is new taxes involved in building, as the green taxes and other taxes that was not there before. And they say that we want to be able to build, apartment less than $1,000 rent per month, but it's impossible at this rate. And the cost of like the tools and the materials and all the taxes that impose for the building construction, and also like the time involved in all bureaucracy, like papers and demand and like to have like permits and everything. So they are causing the housing crisis right there. And afterwards they say, for the refugee statute, we don't have like any place to receive them because we have already a housing crisis. But you create both of the problem in the same time. And after that, you just say, but unfortunately, this is the problem, but you are the cause of it.
That's right. Well, and that just goes to show inflation's not just in this silo. This has tentacles out into every sector and segment of our economy. And I find it so ironic here again. For instance, in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford is being condemned for attempting to develop what is known as the Green Belt. And so it's this lush stretch of farmland, and it's in southeastern Ontario. It's near, where Rebel News headquarters is, where I live. And all the environmentalists are all up in arms about developing the Green Belt. And, I agree to a certain extent that developing lush farmland is probably not a wise long-term strategy. But where are we going to house these people? We need to develop something somewhere so that the people who are struggling, who are homeless, who are looking for places to live, have somewhere tangible and available to go. And because we see the vast majority of immigrants coming into Ontario, and that is further condensed into southeastern Ontario specifically, there isn't very much space to put anyone new. And so it's such a double-edged sword, because the environmentalists and the liberals are all protect the environment and don't develop the Green Belt. But then they're like, but we have to take in all of these immigrants, and we can't close our doors to these people seeking refuge status. So where are we going to put everyone? That is just such a basic question. Well, if you don't want to see more development, but you want to keep this influx of never-ending hundreds of thousands of people coming into a small pocket of our province every year, where are we going to house them all? And when Chrystia Freeland says things like, well, it's basic mathematics, it's first of all, like common sense. Thank you, Chrystia Freeland, for reminding us all how this works. But she says that this is a driver of economic growth. And we have a report by TD Economics just, I think this came out Friday, that despite high immigration, Canada's standard of living is lagging. And this story came out of True North. Again, that was on Friday. And it was a report by TD Bank called Mind the Gap. And it's just that first link in the first sentence of the report by True North. It's called Mind the Gap. there it is. A report by TD Economics ranks Canada's standard of living measured by GDP as falling behind developed nations due to low economic productivity. And this report was put out by TD Bank. It's called Mind the Gap. Canada is falling behind the standard of living curve. And so this report done by a bank, a financial institution, which Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is also our finance minister. She should be well aware of a report such as this. This contradicts everything Chrystia Freeland just said in that clip that we showed to you. This is insane.
Yeah. And I'm actually like really pleased to see that TD Bank is still doing like great job in terms of statistic and study when we see like how woke they are, especially like being involved in the museum exhibition where we saw like the naked man. I'm just like, yes, at least they can still do something great.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see in the chart here that was posted on their Mind the Gap report, just how far behind Canada is lagging, for instance, even compared to our southern neighbor, the United States. It shows Canada's growth compares favorably against G7 counterparts, but not for 2020 to 2022 fiscal years. You can see the dark green there depicts the average from 2020 to 2022, whereas the light green is the average from 2011 to 2019. So also a longer stretch of years there.
Yeah, you can see that all of them are going down, but it's just Italy that's going pretty well, but the rest is just, it's not.
Yeah,
not
because
that great.
And I'd have to double check this, but I'm guessing that Italy doesn't have open borders.
Mm-hmm. And also like the change of prime minister recently too.
Yes. Oh, the woman who you would think that all the liberal progressives would be clapping their hands and congratulating, but instead, because she's considered to be conservative and probably also far right in their opinion. Right. Yeah, she is not applauded and upheld as being this woman leader. Okay, so let's go to an ad break here, and then we'll get into some politics with Pierre Poilievre and I guess more far right attributes where parents are advocating for the government to step out of the school system.
Yeah.
In a world plagued by conformity, where truth is distorted, freedom is a distant memory, and Big Brother is always watching. One man, Winston Smith, looks to break through his bleak existence. Introducing the all-new Rebel Illustrated Classics edition of George Orwell's iconic book, 1984. Now, more than ever, in the age of lockdowns, 15-minute cities, and World Economic Forum globalism, everyone must read 1984. Uncover the hidden depths of this literary classic with our exclusive illustrated edition that brings Orwell's haunting vision to life, reborn with a foreword by Ezra Levant and 30 captivating new illustrations by artist Paul Revouche.
You see that Orwell is not only explaining what might come, but in my opinion, what's already here, even back when he wrote it in 1949, but much more so as we see revealed today, particularly with the last 3 years.
Join the rebellion against conformity. Get your hands on the Rebel Illustrated Classics edition of 1984, now available at buy1984.com.
All right, so this next story we have out of Calgary, and it happened at the Calgary Stampede. One of, Calgary MP's Hallen, his pancake breakfast, which was a public event that happened during the Calgary Stampede last weekend. And he is pictured here with some, I think 3 other men. The Toronto Sun published this article. It says, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's office is tight-lipped over a photo of one of his opposition critics posing with two people wearing slogans against measures addressing sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. So you can see the two men here are wearing "Leave Our Kids Alone" t-shirts with the Canadian flag, and they're shielding some children with umbrellas from, I guess, raining pride. The little slogan at the top, I guess, their right of their shirts. And so this image, as Toronto Sun, I think it was Brian Lilly that wrote this piece here, or no, sorry, from the Canadian Press, Stephanie Taylor, wrote that the image shared to social media surfaced not long after Poilievre distanced himself from another photo in which he stood next to a man wearing a t-shirt referring to straight pride. And I think we have a little clip of that actually, because the media pushed back on Poilievre for that photo. And I mean, you're a politician, you're out mingling in public, you're meeting lots of people, you're shaking hands, you're not always aware of who's going to be there, who's standing next to you, who you're taking a photo with. I, for one, even, as someone who does not have as much notable recognition as someone like Pierre Poilievre, if I'm out at a rally or I'm covering an event and people recognize me, they want to introduce themselves, shake their hands, they want to get photos. I'm not always like looking them up and down at their attire to see what they're wearing in that instance. And so I imagine that something like that is just so much more amplified when you're a politician. But regardless, yeah, here it is. There's that guy there is wearing a straight pride t-shirt. And I mean, unless you're like really narrowing and zooming in on his t-shirt, I, at a quick glance, wouldn't read or see what was on the t-shirt there. And I'm not trying to dismiss scrutiny or say that you shouldn't be more aware of your surroundings as a politician and in public events. But I'm just saying something like this just seems way overblown, out of proportion. I don't personally think it's a huge deal either way. They want to see politicians parading around with pride flags and supporting these ideas. Well, why can't someone say, well, I'm proud to be straight and I have straight pride? That doesn't, to me, seem like there's anything harmful or hateful involved in that. But regardless, the mainstream media journalists decided that this was something that needed to be scrutinized. And so they pushed back against Poilievre. And I really just liked his response here that he gave.
A man showed up in Alberta with a straight pride shirt, posing with politicians for photo ops. What do you say about that kind of messaging as people from the LGBTQ plus community are fighting for equality in Canada?
I don't agree with that shirt.
Just a way to like completely disregard and just move on. Like, I don't even have time for this is kind of how I read this. I disagree with this shirt. I mean, whatever, if he disagrees or not. But I see this as just a way for him to completely brush this aside, basically say, I don't care, and move on.
And by the way, one of the men in picture with the Conservative MP, I think his name is Shasra Singh Alan. Sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly. But the man on the picture is Mahmoud Moura. It was also the one who did publish the video where we see Mr. Trudeau being challenged by a Muslim father. And he's the one who did also participate to the Muslim protests, like the parents raising up to protect the children also. So I just want to say to you, everybody, that an interview with him will follow with me. So if you are interested to hear his side of the story, what he think about Justin Trudeau policy and everything that surround what we see as a controversy right now, don't miss my report. It will be probably published this week.
And actually, our Calgary reporter, Adam Soos, did an interview with, sorry, what was it? Mohammed? No, what was his name? Alexa?
Mahood.
Oh, sorry, Mahmoud Moura. He did an interview with him at an LGBTQ counter protest at Calgary City Hall last week. And so for anyone who's interested in checking that out, maybe we can I'll put the link here and we can just show it on screen quickly, because he's been a very vocal advocate against the indoctrination and proliferation of sexual ideology into our school system. These parents are being called far right and hateful by school boards, teachers unions, by our very own government. We'll share with you in just a moment. But these parents are basically saying that under the umbrella of sexual identity and gender orientation, children are being radicalized sexually through these inclusivity and diversity and tolerance ideologues. And they're being, it's a slippery slope, because again, this is all ambiguously worded pieces of legislation, but guidelines that are given to teachers and principals and school boards. And it's really up to the interpretation of the teacher, how they will interpret the curriculum and then teach it. And so we see some of these teachers have become so radicalized and showing these kids basically pornographic content in school. There is one particular story called Identity or Identify. And it depicts pedophilic incest, and it is absolutely disgusting. It's been made available in public schools and Catholic schools, in the high school libraries, made available to children, and parents are fed up. They've been kept in the dark. These curriculums have been kept secret from them. It's not adequately disclosed, and parents, rightfully so, are saying, what's going on in our school system? They question whether or not this is appropriate, and no one is able to give them any answers. So they're becoming increasingly frustrated with the boards, the teachers, and now, of course, the government. But we have here recently Justin Trudeau, our fearless leader. He's blaming American right-wing politics for Muslims opposing the LGBTQ curriculum with shirts such as those that were pictured, "Leave our kids alone." And we have a clip here to share with you. This comes from New York Post, but I think it's originally from Fox News. And this is just absolutely asinine that our leader is politicizing parents who just want their kids to be left alone from radical sexual indoctrination. I think there's a clip here on the
I was waiting for the clip. I was like, oh.
The New York Post article had a little clip embedded in there. Anyway, I don't know if we have another clip of Justin Trudeau calling these parents right-wing or far-right, hateful bigots, essentially. But this is also, when they say LGBTQ, this is leaving out a large portion of who identifies under this umbrella. So it's like 2SLGBTQIAA plus, I think it is now. And so it's just like this catch-all alphabet soup of anyone who decides to willy-nilly identify as anything. And it can be, as we see, gender fluid. So you can be fluid. You can change your identity from day to day or week to week or month to month. And many parents are also expressing concerns because under that fluidity, boys or people with sexual deviances or mental health issues can identify as females, and they can now infiltrate traditional female-only spaces. So especially where you see vulnerabilities like in women's and young girls, change rooms and bathrooms. Now anyone who says, well, today I identify as a girl, so I'm going to use the girls' bathroom. And parents are sounding the alarms on stuff like this and saying, this isn't appropriate. There's a real safety threat and risk here, and we want some answers. And because they're disregarded as being hateful bigots or transphobes, they don't get any of these answers. And so they are naturally becoming increasingly frustrated. And more we see that these protests are growing. It's not going the opposite way. These are getting bigger and louder. And I think the issue is only going to be further rehashed when school starts up again in September.
And you need to, like you probably are aware, you have kids yourself. But at one point in life, children are searching their identity, who they are, and sometimes it passed by a crisis or really emotional time. And I have the impression that this come to a moment in life where instead of discovering really who they are, what they like, and really do some self introspection, they are just going and just use the umbrella of the LGBTQ plus fluid gender, whatever. And at one point in life, they would just realize that, oh my God, I think I really made a big mistake, and I regret what I did. And sometimes it would be too late for some of them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're seeing coming down the pike now, is the children who were early engagers with this gender dysphoria and transitioning are now saying, whoa, I made a massive mistake. You know, how could I have been led down this path? And now everything I told was, I was told at the time was reversible is actually not. And now they're coming to the realization that they're infertile. They've damaged their body. They have all these health effects. They will never be able to have children. Some of them cannot even have fulfilling sexual relationships because of the kinds of hormones and surgeries that they've received. So we're starting to see this coming down the pike now, but there's many parents out there who are trying to prevent this from continuing and happening more and more into the future. So that's a really sad part here. I see that we are running out of time as usual, but we have just one more topic that we want to get with you, which is the bureaucratic overspending amidst record high inflation. So I think we'll just skip our ad breaks that we had scheduled, and we can just get right into this. I'm not sure if my article, I wrote an article this morning, and it was just waiting to be published, that basically ties in all of the things that we were going to talk about here into one condensed piece. And it hasn't gone up yet. So that's all right. The first one's from Blacklocks, and it details $18 million spent by Canada's Governor General, Mary Simons, to be a guest of honor at a German book fair, essentially. And this dates back to 2021. Canada's guest honor sponsorship of a German book fair with Governor General Mary Simon cost more than $18 million, according to a newly disclosed federal audit. The event lasted 4 days and, as I mentioned, took place in 2021. Now, Mary Simons was, I lost my tab here. She was paid approximately $800,000 alone for her engagement, this crucial engagement. And it included, lavish food budget, the hotel costs, the cost of transportation, et cetera, et cetera. I wish that I'm trying to just find the article that I wrote so that I can share some of the other stats with you, because the National Post actually broke this a few years ago, and they detailed a lot of the spending and broke it down. And it's just outrageous. And this is 2021, right? We're 1 year post-pandemic, when Canadians' small business has been absolutely decimated. Canadians have been prevented from going to work. They have lost their businesses. They've lost their jobs. The vaccine mandates are just coming out, so even more Canadians are losing their jobs. The country in general is struggling. And our Governor General has a mandate to uphold government responsibility. And that, to me, would include fiscal responsibility. But again, and time again, we're seeing that our Governor General is just living the lavish life. She's supposed to speak on behalf of the King. And so we see that she's treating herself more like royalty than anything. And instead of ensuring government accountability and fiscal responsibility, as would be her mandate, she's just out there living the high life, being paid for these engagements when arguably they could have probably happened equally as well on Zoom or Skype. And there's no repercussions here. There's no accountability.
And especially like the trouble in Iceland, how much she paid for a limousine for 4 days, when we saw the skyrocket inflation, and she paid $71,000 for a luxury transport service in Iceland. And we don't talk about like traveling around Iceland, because the conference was happening in Reykjavik, the main like city in Iceland, and most of the transportation was like about 8-minute walk. It was just outrageous to read like the detail of renting this kind of luxury transport. This is not even the middle wage cost of salary that people gain per year in Canada, and she spent that just for a luxury transport. This should not be happening at all.
That's right. And that's what, so Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, they put a call out a few weeks ago, maybe it was a few months ago even now, that the government has to cut their needless and unnecessary international travel expenses. But who's listening? No one. They gave themselves a raise. They give themselves a raise every year. And despite the fact that Canadians can't afford to put groceries and healthy food on the table, most of them can't even abide by the Canada Food Guide because it came out in 2019. And now we can't afford the recommended daily servings of fresh fruits and vegetables that are recommended by our own National Food Guide because of inflation and the seemingly endless increases to interest rates. Canadians are really struggling here. And you have someone like our Governor General, who again is supposed to uphold government responsibility and ensure government responsibility. And I would say that includes fiscal responsibility. She's spending, give or take $100,000 on meals on airplanes when she flies to these international engagements. This just seems so out of touch. And this is someone who is mandated to ensure that Canadians remain confident in their prime minister, but also in their government. And so when someone who's issued that role is acting this way and living a lavish life while Canadians are struggling, that doesn't really give Canadians a whole lot of trust or confidence in their government or the government structure.
And
so that's...
The most hypocritical point is like when she went to Iceland, it was for like ensuring like policy for climate change. But instead of walking, she took a private luxurious transportation. Oh, and by the way, the meal that she was consuming on the plane, this is not vegetarian. It was beef bourguignon. So I thought that eating meat was bad for climate change, isn't it?
Yeah, in her introductory speech in 2021, she made like that was her mantra, was focusing on diversity, inclusion, equity, environment, all the things, all the policies that we see the Liberals trying to ram through and push down our throats. She was really into all of them. And so I don't know what part this lavish spending has to do with diversity, inclusivity, how these bills and endeavors relate to the environment, and especially, with, as you mentioned, her limo bills. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation noted that she could have gotten around this small island, Iceland, for less than the price of a brand new BMW. That's essentially what she paid. She could have just purchased a BMW, drove it around for 4 days, and then sold it and billed the taxpayers less than limousine in treatment for 4 days. This is so fiscally irresponsible. And I'm not surprised at this point, but I don't know where Canadians think that they're going to get any accountability on any of this.
But in fact, it's like she's not been like reprimanded for doing that. Justin Trudeau let that going in. He is aware about this, but he's not doing anything. He's not like trying to say, can you like save money next time, or just don't do like this amount of expense. But is not finding her accountable of what she did. So of course next time she would do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, because there's no accountability. People used to resign over scandals like this, but now it's just, well, we're sorry and we're just going to move on and hope for the best. And because of the unofficial Liberal and NDP coalition, there will be no accountability because they just prop each other up with all of their policies that we're seeing in real time failing. So we have one super chat that I see from Longmeadow, who gives $5 for all the CPC supporters out there. Ask yourself, why is Pierre silent on important issues until he deems it safe to give a reply to media? Also, can Rebel interview Pierre? We've tried. We've tried to scrum him. We've reached out to his office for interviews. He is, as far as I know, and this is probably actually going back about a year, so maybe it's changed now, but pretty unlikely to give a media interview to us or really any media in general. I think he's done a couple mainstream media engagements, but not very much. He prefers to keep his messaging tight and succinct and similar to, I think, the way that Trump kind of handled the media in general. But also, politics is downstream from culture. And so when Pierre Poilievre finally comes out and says things like, recently he condemned the continued enforcement of vaccine passports in the healthcare sector. When he comes out and he does those things, that is because the culture now has shifted and people are growing in those numbers of opposition to things like vaccine passports. So when you sway the culture, the politics will follow. But I'm really of the thought that politics is downstream from culture and the culture needs to shift before the political landscape does. And so that would explain why Pierre is silent on important issues until he deems it safe to do so. And also a deeper issue with politics in that they're not necessarily standing on merit and integrity. They're just doing what they think everybody else wants them to do.
Yeah. And I would say that the last opportunity I had, I interviewed Pierre, but it was during the leadership race for the Conservative Party. And afterwards, I don't think he really took the time to give that much interview afterwards.
Yeah, he's been very tight-lipped on media engagements, but that's not to say that we haven't tried or that we will not continue to try, because that is our job. And we'll certainly keep following, and especially if there's an election, we'll be, of course, deploying rebels out to cover something like that. So thanks for your comments. And I guess with that, we're 8 minutes past the hour. So unless there's any additional super chats, we will wrap this up. Thanks, Alexa, for joining me.
You.
I know that we don't get to chat often or join each other on the daily stream really ever. So that was fun and always a pleasure to see you and have some dialogue. For anyone in the back end, Efron, Olivia, all of the writers and thumbnail makers who make this live stream possible, thank you for your hard work, because you're not front facing, so you don't always get the recognition, but it's equally as deserved. So thank you for that. And for everyone who tuned in today, thanks for joining us. And there will be another Rebel, I think myself and maybe Drea here, same time and place tomorrow. I guess I should button that up with the fact that the studio is seeing another small renovation, some small tweaks. So this studio is closed this whole week. So we'll be co-hosting and hosting the daily stream remotely. And David Menzies has been sent out on a special mission to complete this week. So you'll want to stay tuned. But if you want to know more about our studio, I can't remember, we had been posting updates at Rebel Studio. I think it was rebelstudio.com I can't remember. There's so many URLs to remember. I don't remember what it was, but that's it. I think it's buildthedream.ca. Let me just double check to make sure that works before I direct everyone there. Yes. So buildthedream.ca. We overhauled our studio, and now we're doing just a couple additional tweaks based on the feedback that we've got from our wonderful donors and our viewers. So the studio is closed all week while we tweak that and complete the final touches to the renovation. So stay tuned. And if you want to help us in that endeavor and get some more lights and some more equipment, you can do that at buildthedream.ca. Thanks again for everyone who tuned in, and we'll see you back here, same time and place tomorrow.
And thanks, Tamara.
Thanks, Alexa.